All right, welcome to the Insurance Restoration Lab. This is our second episode. This is John Walker, and I'm here with Greg Thode, and we want to welcome you. We started our podcast a little quick this last week in light of some current events, and so we want to take this opportunity now to introduce ourselves and who we are. So I'm going to let Greg, age before beauty. I'll let Greg go.
Thanks, John. Yep.
And just introduce yourself, tell us who you are and your background and why we're doing this thing.
Okay, very good. Again, Greg Thode. I've been doing insurance restoration work for about 27 years now. And had a family friend. I was crab fishing in Alaska. And I had a family friend in our church that I would come home and he would always be out. Told me he was a pro bass fisherman. And I was like, how do you do that? I'm from Georgia. There's no pro bass fishermen in Washington State. And it ended up, he was a very small mitigation company, restoration. And he said, I'll take you out. And at that time, he was about 70. He said, I'm thinking about retiring. If you like what I do, I'll sell you a company. And so I went out with him and we extracted water and dried down some places, cleaned some carpets, cut out some drywall, and got paid. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I could stay home instead of being gone 9 months out of the year. And so went from there. And at the time, he wasn't quite ready to sell. So I started buying equipment, taking some IICRC classes on how to dry, science of drying, all the different things they had, fire classes, mold remediation classes, and pretty much got all the certifications that they were able to offer, and just started in between fishing seasons, come back and market myself, and just started building up the company, and eventually started doing more and more. He sold his company to me, and had that going for quite a while. Did a lot of property management stuff. And then in about 1999, I was approached by a franchise organization. They weren't really represented in the Seattle market. Found it very interesting. We did some negotiations at the time and ended up saying no thank you. And then they came back and they made a better offer. And we inked the deal, and I worked with them. Had 5 different offices here in the Northwest in Portland over a 20-year career and with them. And then ended up being purchased, bought out by a larger entity that owned them, and it was a really good run. So we always did everything, start to finish: restoration, the water damage, the cleanup, the contents, and then the rebuild. And so took some time off after the company sold, and was approached by another company out of California and opened up a facility here in Washington. We're looking at different locations around the U.S., mainly on the West Coast, Midwest, and things are going really well. And so really that's it. My wife and I worked very close together for many, many years until we got to a much larger size where we had admin staff and things of that nature. So it's been an incredible run. I love the industry. And one of the reasons why I wanted to work with John on this show was to kind of show how we have been able to work together. That I think is part of the success that I feel I've always had is that I can go into a meeting and explain what I need to do and why I need to do it. And typically, if the adjuster is open to hearing it and their hands aren't tied by certain rules of their organization, we can come to a understanding and get contracts signed and do the work appropriately. So that's really been about it, John.
Awesome.
Awesome. I worked with John over the years plenty. We went back and forth on many claims, and always a great guy to work with. So good stuff.
Yeah, and that's how we met. Was your wife also was working with us in when I started getting involved in Puget Sound Adjusters Association, which is the adjuster contractor organization here in the Seattle area. And man, just good people. I knew right when I met the Thodes, it was they're good people, right? You get that radar. You try to go, hey, you meet some people, you're going, right, sorry,
right.
But
there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah. So no, we did. we were getting involved in the Puget Sound Adjusters Association. I a little bit about me, I guess. Is it my turn?
It's
Am I
your
okay
turn.
to talk? Okay.
Yeah.
No, so I'm a second generation insurance guy, and I originally went to college, and I was going to be a dentist, and so I was pre-dental at my college and majored in biology, and I realized towards the end of my undergrad, while I was interviewing for dental school, I was like, I don't know if I like people's mouths enough to be a dentist, and I'm going, I got these big hands, I'm 6'3", 260 pounds, going,
Right.
I don't know if I want to be a dentist, sitting there in people's mouths, and nothing against dentistry, but I have a lot of friends now that are dentists, and so my father was just starting a franchise of an insurance independent adjusting franchise. He says, hey, there's one available. You'll be one of the youngest owners in the company. I think I was the third youngest to start, and started out doing auto appraisal. That's what my dad does. He does all auto. He's the repair auto diminished value expert. And so I came on board, and he taught me how to estimate a vehicle for damage repair. And then I recognized some patterns in the industry. And I started going, I think the appraisals are going to start going away.
Really?
And so I brought on another mentor. I didn't bring on. I asked someone to mentor me, and my good friend Mitch taught me how to adjust a liability claim and how to adjust a property claim. And then I started just building that and learning that way. And then I started seeing the property claims kind of go by the wayside as well, and started going, these adjusters aren't doing property claims anymore.
Right. Was that Mitch Powless?
Mitch Powless, yeah.
I worked with him.
Yeah, Mitch is great.
I haven't heard his name in years. So.
Such a good guy.
Yeah.
And taught me a lot of what I know, almost everything I know about property claims and adjusting liability claims. And then I started recognizing that the property claims are also going away because for whether programs or whatever reason,
right,
the adjusters are getting squeezed out. And so I started learning how to do dispute resolution.
Right.
And so here I am now, several iterations later of what an adjuster or someone in the insurance industry can make of themselves. And so
right.
That's kind of my path. And, again, worked with Greg and Kelly on several projects in other different areas. And it just was a lot of fun to get to know you guys. So, and then something real personal, not real personal, but you and Kelly have how many kids?
We have 4.
4 kids.
Yep.
And they're all out of the.
Yeah, they're all
out.
We're empty nesters.
They're empty nesters. Now, and I have.
Well, I do have one turned 19. He's 20. He's almost out.
Almost empty nester.
Almost.
And I just had my 6th child last year.
Wow.
So we're nowhere near.
Yeah.
being empty nesters. But that's a little bit about us, right?
You know how that happens.
I learned.
Figured that
out.
Okay.
I figured it out. I have a friend of mine says it's washing the laundry together. So anyway, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Not this subject matter what we talk about.
Right.
So that's a good segue. What is it?
Great.
Why are we here? What is the crux of the Insurance Restoration Lab? How did we even come up with that name? How about that? How do we start with that?
Well, when we were first talking about it, we had ideas bouncing all over the place. And, again, back on how we were able to work together, John sees so many different people, contractors, body shop. Yeah, I mean, you name it, right?
Yeah.
And you're juggling all different types of personalities, different programs. Everything is being thrown at you. And you really do. It's almost, if you were to see the movie The Matrix, right? You're just bending and flexing and trying to take it all in and survive. And then you start to tighten up, at least is what I did, where you just finally decide, okay, you can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
But you start to gravitate. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like-minded people, but people that can understand what you're doing and not just be, well, the button says this, right? That says that, and that's all it is. And we're, again, like in the opening where I said you can actually sit down and have a discussion with somebody. In my world, somebody that knows construction or somebody that knows water or fire damage, and, be able to work with, again, maybe not like-minded people, but like process people, where you can go there and prove what you need to do You can come up with a budget that will afford you to do that. And both parties can walk away feeling like, all right, this is a good thing. Let's get this job started.
Right. Yeah, and we've always really stressed the key and the art of discussion and communication. I think in many of our discussions, we've just talked about how most claims jump off the rails right when people stop communicating effectively.
That's right.
And so, Greg sees it on the contractor side. I see it on the claim side, is where personalities don't mesh.
Right.
Pride gets in the way.
Yep.
The ability just to tell the story behind it. And so, the communication is key. And I think that's part of what are the crux of what we want to discuss in these podcasts is how to communicate, how to tell the story, how to understand the process and build effective communication. And we joke, or not joke, I even talk about this bell curve of this effort. You can put in a tiny bit of effort to try to tell your story as a contractor and not get paid as much. And
Right.
you can put a little bit more effort into it, and that's when you're going to see that big increase in probably being able to tell the story and justify what your estimate or your invoice is going to be. And then you can spend too much time and too much energy where you start really not getting a return on investment on that energy. And so it's an interesting spectrum I see out there of people, because I see every bit of it. I see the guy who's not taking very much pride in what he's doing, and I take the guy who takes too much pride in what he's doing, and then discussions fall apart.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Insurance Restoration Lab, we wanted to discuss the secret sauce, the elixir
Secret sauce. Yeah.
of obtaining, communicating, and then reaching a resolution.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
And we had spoken about like the alchemy, of all this, right? All these compounds coming together and what the final output would be. And what we're really hoping also to do is, once this thing is going good and hopefully you like our content, you're coming back, and then we start getting feedback from you, whether it's on our YouTube channel, wherever you happen to see it, and say like, hey guys, I love that. Hey guys, I'm really not feeling what you're saying. I'm a contractor out here that hates working with an insurance adjuster, and here's the reason why. What we're not looking for is just haters on either side.
Right.
We're looking for people that maybe see it the way both of us do, that there is this middle ground, and it's not always there. I mean, it's a chess match, it's a battle, and it's an ever separating divide that we see going on. At least I do.
Yeah,
you see
absolutely.
That?
Yeah.
And from when let's just go into like TPAs, right? Third-party administrators. When we very first came in, I think Alacrity may have been. It was either the State Farm PSP program or Alacrity. PSP program wasn't a TPA. State Farm managed that. But there was an Alacrity program, which is still alive today. I think it got bought out by Lowe's, one of their corporations or whatever years ago. But, we used to go into these meetings with them. I remember it was down in Bellevue, and we would go over pricing. We would go over methods, and it was two groups together. And like fuel cost went up. They were like, okay, we're going to make an adjustment. And they would look at the actual data and say, okay, we can do that. A lot of those things happen today in Xactimate, but a lot of them don't.
Right.
A colleague that, I shouldn't say colleague, we've never worked together, but a man that I really respect, Ben Justine, hopefully I'm not butchering your last name, but I've forever sat and preached so much. And then one day I saw his outtake on things and just uploading estimates and how Xactimate reads these things and puts them in. And most contractors aren't like uploading their estimates and getting these pricings. They just go like, these prices suck. And it's like, well, what are you doing to adjust that? If you can't get the ear of an adjuster who has no control over Xactimate, and they do kind of, and I'll explain that in a minute. But you've got a machine that's producing these ideas or these methods and these numbers. And as most people know, you want to upload those numbers. It reads those. It makes pricing adjustments to that. But when you have carriers that have tens of thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of documents, estimates being pushed through that machine, and you have virtually no contractors uploading their end, that really the pricing is being adjusted by the insurance company, not because they're saying we're only going to pay this, but because they just put it in for what they, that mechanically just put in what the line item says and upload that. And the contractors, for the most part, typically aren't doing that.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned before an electrician bid, for example, right? Learning how or understanding how to upload using the system correctly. That's so right. That it will adjust. Electrical is always disputed. It's very always tough. Here in Washington specifically, there's some stuff going on in our state that changes the pricing quite drastically.
Right.
But if you're not doing it the correct way, you're almost shooting yourself in the foot.
You really are. You have only yourself to blame for that. So it would be my take on that.
And I would think that we'll go through that. Let's have an episode about that. We'll talk about how to specifically update those price lists on the contractor side, so that it's beneficial.
Right. Yep. That'll be tough. We might have to call in a specialist for that.
Well, you'd mentioned
it's easy enough to adjust a price, but it's not easy enough to have a price list adjusting behind the scenes that comes to you that's updated, and that's really what you're talking about there.
Well, and it sure beats. I've seen a lot of chatter online about the guys that are doing a one-line item estimate for an entire fire. They go $300,000.
Right.
That is our price.
Right.
I will not talk to anybody about it. I won't tell you how I got there. I will not say a word. I won't show you contractor sub invoices. I won't show you my time and materials.
Right.
That is the price.
Right.
And I think that is a step in the wrong direction.
It's just moving your camp farther away while they move their camp farther away.
Right.
And I'm not saying everybody's always going to work together.
Right.
I mean, a lot of that. We had a phone call today where we got a guy out in the middle of the night to do a dry down and everything, and the adjuster called him and said, "That was great. Thank you so much. By the way, don't put overhead and profit on your bill. We're not paying it." So they're not going to pay us for having the guy go out. Basically, that we did. And I don't know, maybe the insurance company should have sent somebody out. But, and that's a whole nother discussion and debate. But,
we decided not to discuss many overhead and profit topics just yet. We'll get there.
It's too deep.
We'll get there. This is the first episode, right? Or our first technical episode, our second episode, but this is our introduction.
Yeah,
but
it is.
We really do want to touch on the hot topics, but find a way to communicate. And I don't know, it doesn't need to be a debate so much as it's just communication.
Discussion.
And reasonable minds will prevail in most situations. And if not, there's processes that you can go through, and you can go through the appraisal clause and dispute that. And you can get a public adjuster, the independents. You can get experts. You can get consultants. You can have a consultant come in. And so there's a lot of these ways that you can ultimately get there. And it doesn't have to be a huge production right off the get.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And at the end of the day, you just have to make a business decision, right? Instead of going to battle against certain people, you just move them out of the way, and you go for the next job. And, And you just go like, hey, I'm sorry, Mr. and Miss Homeowner or Mr. Building Owner, your carrier they don't want to work with you or us or whatever, and you still try to make it happen.
Right.
I mean, but at some point you get there where you're just like, okay, this just isn't going to work, and I wish you the best. But you really want to try to, if you're right up front in the very beginning of where you're going in your methods, you can 9 times out of 10 get it going.
Right. And first step is speaking the same language, right? And we want to try to get that way. And there's a lot of good and bad said about estimating programs out there. But it is just a base. It's a language to speak.
Right.
If we can all speak the same language, it does happen to go by a lot easier in my experience.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a few other things we want to chat real quick on. Is what is the impact that automation is having on the industry?
The automation, the AI, and things like that is amazing. It's absolutely incredible. I know in our opening segment, I talked about Dash and Builder Trend, and there's a lot of 3D type cameras out there. I've checked a lot of them. They're wonderful. We just happen to use Matterport. We love it. We order the schematic drawings that come out, and we estimate off of that. And I really believe that's the future. A lot of people would hate to see this, or some people argue it, saying, well, you got to have the human factor all the time. But there's so much that's coming out with AI that, I mean, you could just use the Home Depot app today and put your camera on things in your room, and it'll tell you the price of that product at Home Depot. It'll read it just off your camera.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and that you'll see, we're seeing a lot more of that come. And so, you know, when you see, you know, a lot of the automation has already allowed the insurance companies to terminate employees, right? I think Allstate laid off was like 35 to 3,800 adjusters a few years ago.
Wow.
I mean, and they just have a skeleton crew there now because so much of it, there's a program out called Ask AIM or Ask Amy, and you take your estimate, you put it in there, and the artificial intelligence filters through it to see if there's anything that's out of whack on it. That stuff, you know, if you're an estimator, you'd be like, that's garbage. I hate it. I had a guy the other day tell me that Matterport was garbage.
Yeah.
It doesn't know how to measure. And we're double checking these things down, and they're like down to less than a quarter of an inch most of the time. And it's like, man, my guy with his tape measure or laser, you know, not tape measure, sorry. We barely use those anymore. But, you know, that aspect of it is actually shocking. And personally, I think, you know, companies, if they were to really advance themselves, you know, you would almost as an agent go in when you're binding, like if you're binding a policy on a home, right? That you would expense that money for that, and you could actually scan that home. You could already know every square foot, every aspect. Now people will remodel and upgrade, but you're still pretty much going to have that, right? You're going to have captured so much of it where you could actually have a replacement cost of that home of the day that you were to bind it or within a couple of weeks, because it'll automatically, you know, put out all the square footages, length, width, height of everything. And so if you did have a claim, you know, you could look at this and say, yeah, okay, we owe you $330,000. There you go. Your house burned to the ground.
And the pre-documentation is huge.
Yeah.
Right. If you have it down before, you know, there's insurance companies right now that'll, you know, I'm certain there were drones flying over Florida right before that Hurricane Ian hit. Right. What were they doing? Right. They were documenting those roofs. Right. All the way through that path area, they were documenting to make sure that someone wasn't claiming something that was already there. Right.
Well, that too, you know, I spoke about Matterport, but you have Eagle View, a phenomenal product. Yeah. It's a satellite view of your home, gives you the roof measurements, gives you siding takeoffs, windows takeoffs, door takeoffs, anything in the exterior, as long as you're not blocked from the south. Right. And amazing product. Hover's another one. We like Hover, but we use Eagle View more. Right. To each of their own, whatever you decide you want to use. And that it drops it right into the program. Wow. So I mean, when I got into this, I mean, I can't tell you how many ladders a year I bought. You know, ladder assist with adjusters, or my guys up on roofs all the time, measuring roofs, measuring hips, valleys, rakes. Yeah. All the different things, and now you just press a button and $69.95. You have, you know, 33 square, blah 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 roof, and you're done. Yeah,
and less workers' comp claims.
Oh my gosh, the highest workers' comp claims there are is roofers. Right, highest rate. We have L&I in Washington, where Washington State has their own insurance. Right. A lot of it, when we work with insurance companies, they're like, "Where's your workers' comp?" And it's like, "Oh, here's our L&I," and they're like, "No, your workers' comp." Like that is our workers' comp.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so I think that there needs to be a good blend of both technology and human interaction.
100%.
It's just like my opinion on gas cars versus full electric cars. Right. I think hybrid's the answer. But anyway, we won't even go down there. I'm a car guy.
Now. I know what you mean. Yep.
There needs to be a blend of the technology and the human aspect of it, and really some fluidity rather than rigidity, right? And so like you were mentioning before, adjusters will go, my booklet says I cannot pay more than this for this. Yeah. Right. And
if you're on a program.
Right. If you're on a program. Yeah. And then you go, but here's the pricing at the local hardware store, like that, or anywhere. You're like, this is not going to cover it. Right. And nope, sorry, per my protocol, Right. And it really is, and a lot of the disputes get to that too. It's based on the rigidity of the program and or the policies, and they're bound. There's many adjusters that are bound. Right, absolutely. And then the opposing contractor or insured might get upset. Well, they're bound by that. It's not that person who's trying to be a jerk about it. It's the program, right? Right. And so you got to get through the process and really not take a lot of it personally. And there's a lot of hurt feelings out there in the world, and hopefully we can bridge that gap with the Insurance Restoration Lab. So.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking to that, a lot of those things come from TPAs, third-party administrators, which, are promising a lot to insurance companies, and then they're also trying to promise a lot to the contractor. I mean, look, if you're on a program, that's fine. They're just different sets of business. If you're a person that's not a big marketer, you don't really know all the aspects, ins and outs of a business. Maybe a TPA or a third-party administrator or getting in with a carrier that way is the way to go. For me, it's not the way to go. But, once you do that, read the contract, read what they're taking out and what they're going to allow you to do, what kind of discounts they're asking for, and make an informed business decision. Don't, I think there's too many guys that go like, wow, they're going to send me $2 million a year. I get asked all the time, like, hey, what does it take to get into this business? When the hurricane hit, I can't tell you how many calls I got saying, what do I need to go, what do I need to do to get down there? And how do I make money on this? And I'm like, don't do it.
Right.
You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're getting into. There's a reason why there's a small pool of restoration contractors. Right. And every year they just go by the wayside and new guys pop up. And I mean, you mentioned, and the one was the NFIP, right? National Flood Insurance Program. And so many guys, I'm like, oh, tell me this. What's NFIP? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, you ever heard of National Flood Insurance Program? And they're like, no, what's that? I'm like, you're really going to go to Florida?
Right.
You might want to sharpen your knife a little bit here, sharpen your pencil. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's the education piece. And Greg, having been on the reconstruction side, this guy knows his stuff. He knows how to run the business. He thinks I've observed it. He knows his stuff, right?
Thank you.
And I know a little bit about insurance, and so hopefully we can be a resource to people and help them understand a little bit more of the process. We can add value to your operation. So
yeah, I think on both sides you really can. If people are willing to have an open dialogue, like I told you in the very beginning with Alacrity,
right.
If we had an open dialogue, you could go in there and say, hey, lumber prices spiked.
Yep.
This is what we're paying. Whatever. Instead of $15 a sheet, we're paying $30. Look, immediately we're paying that.
Right.
We need to make this adjustment. Well, no, your contract says. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, hold on. But back then we could have those discussions, and really it just doesn't need whole armies of people coming together. It needs to make decision makers coming to the table. And I can tell you without fail, without doubt, that if you could get with a carrier and say, do you know how much you're spending to beat this person down and then to slow the process down, your ALE cost, all these different costs, when in reality, we're really not that far off at the end of the day, but the expenditure to get to this argument is astronomical. And again, if you get together and you find you can't come to that agreement, then all right, you're done. But I truly believe in I don't want to say humanity, that, if you have the right people in the room, you make these decisions, you move forward, you run with the ball, and you write a good scope, you get your agreements, and you get the work done. We're here to produce.
Absolutely. That's great stuff, man.
Yeah.
You know your stuff.
I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully you keep watching, come on back. And if you ever have topics you'd like to go over, I mean, we can go granular on this thing. You want to go out to a job site, we'll set a camera up. Yeah. I'll show you why you put PVA on drywall. That's a big argument with adjusters. Well, I'm already paying for 2 coats of paint,
Right.
It had nothing to do with it. So just little weird nuances that just getting the idea out there and saying these are the proper ways to get things done. Yeah,
and it's again, I keep hitting on the education piece, but this is education for adjusters. I'll openly admit there's a lot of things that you've taught me that you go, oh, John, well, think about this. I go, oh, okay, right? And I didn't spend a lot of time in construction. I haven't, right? But a lot of adjusters out there, they know how to use an Xactimate program, right? An estimate. But maybe don't have the understanding of how the process works and how the job works. And that's, again, is understanding. So the adjuster side is understanding how construction works. The contractor side, understanding how a claim works, understanding how to present yourself, present the claim, and it will, in many ways, it will resolve itself.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yep.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
but that return on, how much money these companies are spending to beat down these contractors, it does become a diminishing return.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Rather than closing a claim, because you do have to think about ALE, additional living expense, for anybody who's doesn't know what that term is, but it'll work itself out. So we're the guys. The industry has gone away from each other. We're trying to build the common ground and understand and have everyone. It's a win-win. It really is a win-win if we can get on the same page, communicate, resolve claims, and ultimately everybody's goal is to help the insured out and get them back to pre-loss
really
condition.
Should be. And I do believe, now not everybody, I know plenty of contractors that probably hate this discussion. And I know a lot of adjusters that are like, forget these guys. First of all, I have no time to watch this because I'm buried in claims. And I do believe that there's a portion of both camps that can come together and put together ideas, again, serving the client, serving your insured. That's important, right? That's what everybody preaches, right? And serving them, putting their homes back together, following the rules, the state regulations, hearing what the carrier has to say as to, okay, this is what we have to pay. I mean, if somebody wanted to come to me and say, okay, Craig, here's the deal. We'd love to do this, but this is what we can pay. I'm totally good with that, because then I have a business decision to make, right? But if you say this, and then the next thing after you get people all wired up, you start cutting and cutting and cutting, which seems to be it, right? Just that push down. I'm probably going into more detail. We're running out of time here, but and I appreciate you were getting close to closing.
I was close, but
I could go on for hours on this. A lot of people that know me know, man. I had a coffee just before I walked in here. It was a long day, and it's hit me pretty good. But I'd love to just keep this conversation rolling for hours.
Yeah, if anything, Greg and I have realized we have the gift of gab. We can talk and talk. We've spent hours in this office discussing concepts and ideas, and
Yes, we have.
And really, it just boils down to our desire to help the industry along.
That's right.
Bring us together.
That's right.
So I think we'll close it. Well, next, if you do have an idea of a topic you'd like us to discuss, please comment on our page, and we will, or even any guests that you'd like us to bring on and to have a discussion. We'd love the input and the feedback. And with that, are we good? You want to shut it down?
That's great.
Let's go.
Everybody have a great
Signing
day.
out.
You hope not to see us out there, but if you do, you'll be happy.
Yeah. Thank you
you.
very much, guys. Have a good one.